successes,
their grit, determination, and passion,
and the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. And today we're joined by Bret Boyd. Bret is the co-founder and CEO of Sustainment, which is a software platform that helps US-based manufacturers easily find and work with critical suppliers they need to build and manage their supply chains. Bret, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Elaine. I appreciate you having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. I was very excited to bring you on. Well, first, tell us a little bit about Sustainment and what you do and help us kind of set the table there.
Yeah, so the problem that we are trying to solve with Sustainment, so we're a software and AI company. We've been around for about 5 years, and we are trying to make it easier to find and get work done with U.S. manufacturers. That is our fundamental problem that we believe we have as a nation. And, just to kind of frame this a little bit, when we talk about manufacturing, we are talking about small businesses. Mm-hmm. So manufacturing in the United States is a huge industry, as everybody knows. It's $2.3 trillion at GDP. It employs 13 million men and women. But when you really look at how the industry works, there are about 250,000 manufacturing businesses, just under 99% of whom are sub 500 employee small businesses. So when we talk about manufacturing, we are really talking about this long tail of amazing small and medium-sized businesses spread throughout the country. And fundamentally, though, one of the friction points is that with all of these small businesses, they can be hard to find. So it can be hard to know that in the next city, next county, et cetera, there may be a great manufacturer that you could be working with, but you don't know they exist. They don't know you exist. So that's really the problem space that we built our company to solve.
One of the things that I was surprised to read about in your recent op-ed, which I love the headline, Making American Manufacturing Great Again Starts with Small Businesses. But one of the things I was surprised to find out about and just see the number. Of course, I knew that we were losing manufacturing jobs, but you start out with, after a year of losing an average of 9,000 manufacturing jobs per month, that in February of this year, we brought in we had an addition of 10,000 coming back, 9,000 jobs a month lost in manufacturing. I mean, that's decimating to the industry.
Oh, it's remarkable. I mean, it's not only devastating to the industry and to our national capacity to build the things that we need, but it's also devastating to all of the communities spread throughout the country that are really predicated on manufacturing, that rely on these manufacturing jobs. And the data is way worse than that. If you go back it up 10 or 20 years, I mean, manufacturing historically, was 18 million, 20 million. It was a much larger industry as a percentage of workforce in the United States. And so we are excited to see jobs coming back into manufacturing. We're excited about a lot of the things that we're seeing in the manufacturing industry, but there's a significant challenge that we have to solve here.
Well, you detail, and you're right, this isn't a new phenomenon with just the last administration, this is 10, 20 years of policies that have hurt our manufacturing base and taken it overseas. But you lay out some of the historical look at why it's happening, why we've had this manufacturing base move overseas. Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to look. I mean, you could actually take this all the way back to the policies that we use to encourage development in other parts of the world post Second World War. But the end of the Cold War, I think, is a really helpful place to kind of start when we pick up the story. So, you see the end of the Cold War, you see this movement towards free trade. And there may or may not have been some justifications around free trade in a world in which the United States kind of stood alone as the, major global power. This was way before the rise of China, et cetera, et cetera. So you had a lot of policies that were put in place or allowed to remain in place at that point. And again, I don't even care enough to place value judgments on if that was a good idea, bad idea, et cetera, et cetera. But those policies have essentially remained the primary governing statutes here for the past 30 years. And what's happened in the past 30 years is that the world has significantly changed. So we are absolutely no longer in a place where the U.S. is the unquestioned manufacturing superpower. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Like if you look at the data on the ascendancy of China and how well China has done in being the global manufacturing powerhouse, it's really nuts to look at the data. I mean, there's a statistic that the UN published recently that that China will approach somewhere between 43 and 50% of global manufacturing, total global manufacturing by the year 2030. And these are levels that have only existed two times in history. One being the UK in the Industrial Revolution, and the other being the United States at the end of the Second World War. So regardless of how we feel about this is the reality in which we operate. Too many of the things that are critical to our everyday lives and health and our core industry, I mean, to set aside even the national defense and national security implications, but too many of the core things that we rely upon are built elsewhere. And I'm really glad to see that we feel like we're kind of waking up to this as a country right now.
I feel like, and I know we talked a little bit about this before we came on, is that everyday ordinary Americans kind of got a wake up call to this during COVID when we suddenly heard we're not going to be able to get our antibiotics because they're made in China. So first it was, our antibiotics are made in China. And then second it was, oh my gosh, they're only made in China. And how else are we going to get them? And I think that was frightening. I feel like while COVID was devastating on many, many levels, I feel like it opened our eyes on many, many levels, this being one of them. And when you look at that, you know, I mean, it is an issue of national security when you've got another country who's not necessarily our friend by any stretch of the imagination, you know, supplying us things related to our health. Then you look at the national security impacts. I mean, that's huge. What are you seeing in terms of policies now? I mean, you talk about the tariffs, policies like the tariffs sort of leveling the playing field. I have a small business owner in Northern Illinois who makes the assembly lines, I guess is the best way to put it, the robotics that move the products down for food processing, defense contractors, automotive assemblies. She's variety of products. And so I had her on because she has about 25 employees, maybe 30. I had her on because I wanted to know how the tariffs were impacting her. And so from her perspective with getting parts, it was, okay, well, I'm starting to look at, I can't get my parts in China right now because they're just too expensive. So I'm looking at making them in-house. So that was one aspect of it. The other was she was getting tons of requests for quotes. So she was seeing manufacturers that normally went outside the country ask her for quotes. And she said, I think that's going to lead to more business for me. And so it was very encouraging to hear that. And of course, now it's very encouraging to see that the tariff strategy from President Trump is working. What are you seeing out there in terms of a change?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And there are so many nuances to this. And let me back up, and I'm going to answer this in a little bit of a long-winded way, so I apologize. But back to the problem. Like, so when we think about the problem, this idea that, hey, all of the stuff that's manufactured in China are these toys and cheap trinkets, and it's not that big of a deal if we end up having to pay with it, like that is 100% not the case. Like, so really the strategic challenge of the country is how do we bring back some of these critical areas of supply so that our manufacturers don't have to compete with state-owned enterprises on the other side of the world? Like, that's really what this looks like. And the way that China has become so successful is their government actually will invest in their national champion companies. It will allow those companies to compete, to undercut everyone else on price. They will drive the rest of the industry essentially out of business so that all of the economies of scale will accrue to these Chinese manufacturers. And then they will be in this position of total dominance from these really important product categories. And you mentioned pharmaceuticals. This has happened in drones. It's happening in automobiles, specifically in electric vehicles. It's happened in a lot of telecommunications equipment. So the fundamental problem is, how do we empower the American manufacturers that are characterized by the firm you just mentioned? Like, that is the prototypical American manufacturer, an entrepreneurial business owner that's trying to get after it. So that's the fundamental problem of how do you change this, and what are the tools of national policy that you can apply to actually move the needle here? And, one of them is obviously tariffs. That's not the only tool. There are other elements of national policy that the administration is using here. But I think it's important to see tariffs in that light, because there's so many different perspectives, some deeply uninformed, that you see in the news these days here around, this is whimsical behavior, it's personal, et cetera, et cetera. When in reality, like, there is a fundamental American strategic problem that we have to solve. We have to figure out how to encourage our companies to win in these key industries. So I think that's the framing that leads you to this idea of, like, how's it going and how's it working? And we sit in an interesting perspective. I mean, we work with tens of thousands of manufacturers. Again, our software, we partner with a lot of states. We're the state manufacturing network of almost half of the states. We offer free software to suppliers so that they can essentially say, hey, these are my capabilities, my certifications, my experiences, the machines that I have, et cetera, et cetera. And then we sell software to procurement teams, both in the DoD and in commercial industry, so that procurement teams can more easily find and get work done with their suppliers. So we have part of the company.
Are you like the Uber of manufacturers, connecting them?
A little bit, in the sense that we're helping bringing buyers and suppliers together, but we're really trying to lean into the relationship element of this. So if you look at our website at sustainment.com, for example, you'd see the word relationship all over it, because we really feel like this is a deeply relational industry where people need to specifically work together, right? So in the idea of Uber, and with all due respect to Uber drivers, I don't care that much who's going to pick me up. I don't need to develop a relationship with the specific driver so that I have trust that they will deliver me to the right place, et cetera, et cetera. But in manufacturing, I absolutely have to know my manufacturing partners. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think a lot of folks don't really understand about the manufacturing industry is the extent to which it is a team sport. I mean, manufacturing is done in community. It is a bunch of businesses that will collaborate around these ultimate parts. And this network and the ability to get work done quickly is really, really important in that world. I mean, for example, if I build a pump or a drone or something like that, I will build some elements of those in my factory, and then I will sub some percentage of the parts, maybe 20%, maybe 50%, maybe 80% out to a network of trusted partners who are excellent at that one subcomponent. And then I will bring those into my factory, I'll assemble them, and I will sell them to my ultimate end customers. So that's how manufacturing is done across the board.
So I actually come out of the automotive industry. I worked for Daimler Chrysler in PR. I wasn't in a plant, but I certainly understand the supplier base, and that it's so in Detroit, it's just such a close knit community. I initially started with a supplier that did the robotics for the body in white coming down the assembly line and piecing it, putting it all together. And then I moved into working for Chrysler and understanding that supplier chain. And like you were describing, how it is a team sport. It absolutely is a team sport when you think about building a vehicle, because there's not one supplier that can do it. And there's no one manufacturer that can do it. So they need all of their suppliers lined up from the time that car hits the assembly line, or the first little components hit the assembly line, to the end when it's finally a car. So it's a fascinating process that, unless you've walked a plant or seen something like that done, you just can't even imagine what goes into the manufacturing of a product. And it's quite fascinating to see it done.
It's so amazing. I mean, these businesses are so good. I mean, the mixture of science and artsmanship and craftsmanship that all goes into manufacturing the things that we rely upon is so amazing. It's such a privilege to work with and serve these companies. And to get back to the policy question that you asked here, at the end of the day, we really are trying to level the playing field for these businesses. I mean, the auto industry is again a fascinating example of looking at the Chinese model versus the American model. I was reading something recently that the BYD, the electric car, Chinese electric car company, their factory is as big as the city of San Francisco.
Wow.
So they have these giant vertically integrated, hundreds of thousands of employees in these, and that's the way that they have built their economy, and it makes sense. It's very command driven, et cetera, et cetera. The American way is different. The American way is unlocking the power of our entrepreneurial small business owners to be amazing at what they are amazing at and facilitating them to work together to build what we need as a country. Like that's the American way. And we need to lean into that. We need to not try to copy models from other cultures and other parts of the world. But that really is what US looks like. It looks like thousands of businesses coming together to build the things that we need, and we need to enable that process to happen faster.
So how you say in your op-ed, by engaging with the ecosystem of small and medium manufacturers and leveraging AI powered tools to connect them with larger manufacturers and the government's sustained procurement network, we can foster competition, promote manufacturing excellence, and drive greater efficiencies, all while reducing our reliance on foreign producers. Tell us what that looks like.
Yeah, so software and AI is uniquely capable of making these inferences, right? So we've spent tens of millions of dollars and spent years building technology so that not just getting work done with manufacturers, but like who is the best manufacturer to build this part. So let's say I have the technical drawing for a part. I'm not exactly sure what specific processes or specialties a manufacturer has to have. Like we've trained AI algorithms with a number of expert machinists who've been looking at drawings and saying, okay, that needs to go to a 5-axis mill with the bed size of this, with this kind of material expertise to help make those connections. And that's really the core of like who can build this for me that I may not know. Because as you look at the industry, if you are, for example, if you are an oil and gas manufacturer and you're building downhole drilling parts, you're probably using the same CNC machines. You are working at the same tolerances, using the same materials. You probably have a different quality certification than you would if you were building airplane parts, but you have everything that you need to go build airplane parts for the Air Force or for company X. You might not know that. They might not know that you have that capability, but using software, we can make those inferences to, again, put those two companies in relationship quickly. So that's how we've started working on this. And in the face of tariffs and all of this onshoring initiative, we've done things like you can go on our software and take the website of your Chinese manufacturing partner and just put it in our AI tool and say, hey, are there any companies that have similar capabilities to this within 100 miles of my factory, for example? And we'll recommend some. I'm sure they will be there. They may or may not be price competitive. They may or may not have availability for what you specifically need, but we will take you out of the Google experience, which is very, very difficult in manufacturing, especially kind of in tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 layers of manufacturing, and put you in a world where you can have targeted conversations with relevant companies that, again, you might not know exist. And even if you know them, you might not know that, oh, I didn't know they had a Swiss screw machine that could help me out with this. And so that's really what we're trying to do fundamentally.
I'm going to share your company name with another member of ours who's a manufacturer in Ohio. And while he supports everything about the president's agenda, the tariffs are really harmful to him. And the reason why is because he says there's no place else to get his parts. If there was, he'd go outside of China. And so the tariffs are really hurting him a lot, and doesn't stop his support for, moving in the direction of more free market economy and everything like that. But I know that he would appreciate knowing that you exist if he doesn't already know. But he's kind of a larger small manufacturer. And we call it like a larger small manufacturer. He's got about 250 employees. So to me, that's a large small business. But anyway, I think he might appreciate knowing that. So talk to me about like sort of where we go from here. We've got we see companies that are jumping on board because of the Trump administration's policies directionally, even for those that haven't passed. But he's about incentivizing made in America. So if you're a big company and you build it here, you're going to get more tax incentives. You write that companies like Apple, my old employer, Stellantis, i.e. Daimler Chrysler, and others have already started making announcements to build here in the U.S. The tax bill, the one big beautiful bill, passed out of the House last night. There's obviously great incentives in there for building in America. Where do you see on the horizon?
Yeah, look, I think this is going to work. To be really clear, I think this is going to work. I think we are in the first or second inning of a 20 or 30 year secular shift towards localization of manufacturing supply chains around the world. And specifically in the United States, I think we're in the early part of a renaissance of U.S. manufacturing. I will say that these periods of transition between the old model and the new model are very difficult. It's just hard. And it's hard to be a supply chain team that's been very dependent on global manufacturers. And it's also hard to be an American manufacturing supplier who's being inundated with inbound demand, 10 times more demand than you've ever experienced before. And you're trying to make decisions of how fast do I hire and how much money do I spend on new capacity and new machines and so on. So I do want to respect the men and women that are grinding through this right now, because it is really hard. And in an industry that is as relational as manufacturing, like this isn't just let's get the next Uber driver to show up. It's more complicated than that. Like there is a whole repositioning and reorienting and recertification and onboarding and all of the things that come with new suppliers and new certifications. So I want to underpin that this is a difficult time on both sides, but it's a process that we have to go through as a country, and we have to get there. And we spend a lot of our time with the Department of Defense, who's probably the largest buyer of machine parts in the United States. We're very optimistic that the federal government broadly and the Department of Defense specifically can really be part of this by broadening and diversifying their supply chains to expand their supplier network. They call it the Defense Industrial Base, into commercial manufacturers, and really start working with the broader swath of American manufacturers as opposed to the small group that they've kind of shrank into in recent decades. So we think, again, there are a lot of tools of national policy, tax policy, tariff policy, the way we spend money as a government, and the way that we drive investment and business into these small manufacturers. Like there are a lot of tools that all need to come together. But I'm deeply grateful that we're working on it as a country and that this administration is focused on it.
Last question. Our future workforce in manufacturing. How should the U.S. education system evolve to prepare a new generation of workers in manufacturing?
See, I'm fundamentally a capitalist. And I think if we drive business and opportunity into these companies, so if businesses have more opportunity, they're going to make more investments in people and technology. And they're going to pay higher wages, and higher wages with more interesting jobs are going to drive more people to want to participate in that industry. And I think that's what starts the virtuous cycle. And I have a lot of respect for the training and certification programs and investment in education, and I don't want to diminish that at all. But from my grid square, the way we solve this problem is by driving business into these manufacturers and making them more successful so that they have more to offer to the next generation of workers who, oh, by the way, happens to be deeply disenfranchised with a lot of this knowledge work that's turned out to be way less interesting and compelling than they were taught. Like, I think the pieces are there, but it runs through the success of small businesses that allow them to hire, that pull people into the industry.
That's I couldn't agree more with you, actually. That's a great way to describe it. Well, tell us, sustainment.com is the name of your website, right?
Yeah, sustainment.com. If you hit the login button in the top right, you can create an account. It's free. So we set this up as a public benefit corporation specifically around the mission of we want to be the company that helps enable the small American manufacturing businesses to thrive. So create a free account, fill out your profile, share with the world what you do. And if you're a larger company, specifically working in procurement or supply chain, we would love to sell you software to help you find, connect, get quotes, award projects, manage performance, and do all of the things that you need to do to get work done more quickly with American manufacturers.
Good to know. Well, Bret, thank you so much for joining us. I enjoyed the conversation, particularly in light of the legislation that passed last night and the tariff conversation that's been going on for several months now. And thank you all for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can find audio version anywhere you get your podcast from, and you can watch the show on Job Creators Network channels on YouTube and Rumble. We'll be back soon with another episode.